Matt asked, why exclusively pump if it sounds more stable to breastfeed? Sorry if this has already been answered, but I've been wondering this. So first of all, I'm going to clarify some language real quick. So exclusively pumping is still breastfeeding. What you're referring to when you say breastfeed is you mean nursing. So people who exclusively pump almost never make that decision because that's what they prefer. Pumping is less comfortable, like you said, less stable, way more expensive. People don't really typically want to exclusively pump, but they typically have to exclusively pump over nursing because of circumstances. In my case, my daughter had tongue and lip tie issues that made it so her latch, meaning how she connects to the breast or a bottle, was not good. Basically, she would just kind of let the milk drip down her throat from a bottle, and you can't do that with nursing. You have to actively pull the nipple to the back of your mouth, into the upper palate, and remove the milk with your tongue. And so if you have tongue or lip tie issues, which is when the frenulum of your tongue or your lip, or even sometimes your cheek, affects your ability to move your mouth. So for my daughter, we got it corrected, meaning a surgery to cut it, and it still did not lead to much improvement in nursing, because even though now she doesn't have a physical barrier, she has I always call it a mental barrier. She doesn't want to because in her mind that's something that has never worked for her, so she doesn't do it. And she also, even when she could nurse, was never efficient, even without the physical barrier. And so I began exclusively pumping to make sure that I wouldn't lose my milk so we could keep trying to nurse. And then once it was clear that it was time for me to give up on trying to nurse because she would scream and cry, and obviously that was not positive for either of us, we tried for 2.5 months. It became very obvious that it wasn't going to happen, and it was time to let that go. And so then it was my options are formula or exclusively pumping. Exclusively pumping was working, plus she developed an allergy, and formula for allergies are extremely expensive. But there are other reasons. The majority of people don't choose it. Tongue and lip tie issues or poor latch in general are very common. Another reason is because of babies who are sent to the NICU, so the neonatal ICU. NICU babies are separated from their parents, and their parents are not typically allowed to nurse directly, and so breastfeeding moms are discouraged from, they're not allowed to be close to their baby enough. They end up getting discharged from the hospital. They can't be there. Your babies need to eat every 2 to 3 hours early on. And so they typically get supplemented with formula, or you go hardcore on pumping. And then your body gets used to that. Your baby gets used to that. It can be harder to make those changes. Your body actually will be less effective at removing milk, depending on what type of pump you use. So it can really affect everything, really. So those are a couple of the reasons that someone might end up exclusively pumping, not necessarily fully by choice. There's choices that you make along the way, but people rarely go into it saying, I'm going to exclusively pump. They typically go into it saying, I'd like to nurse, but if I can't, okay, well, now I'm here. I always thought that I would have said, I'll switch to formula and I won't exclusively pump. But it ended up working out a lot better for me. Plus, the biological desire to I always call it be her everything, was very intense, much stronger than I ever expected. And then there are some people who choose to exclusively pump. So those people will have their own reasons, but for a lot of people it ends up being anxiety related, because when a baby is nursing, you cannot tell how much they're eating. In my case, I thought my baby was nursing effectively, and turns out every time I did a weighted feed, she would never get more than 5 milliliters. And it was just impossible to know that without looking at dirty and wet diapers. And I was not willing to use that as a sign, because in order to use that as a sign, you do have to starve your child. Like you do if I had used that as a sign and not combo fed, not given her formula, then she would have been starving for those times, and that wasn't something that I was ever willing to do. I gave her formula right away because that's not something that was within my comfort level. And because of that, I didn't know how ineffective she was. Other people simply choose to because it makes sense for them, but there's a lot of personal reasons. Other people who exclusively pump, if you want to put your reasons in the comments for Matt to look through, that would be awesome.